There's a pattern to everything. And the key to empowerment is understanding what the pattern is of that thing, whether it's our finances, whether it's our relationships, whether it's our health. There's always a pattern behind success or failure. And in the ancient world, they understood that these patterns also exist for understanding who am I? Why am I here? What is the purpose of this current incarnation? What is the purpose of us incarnating into a physical body in a physical world to begin with? Today, when we think about science, we think about it being quantitative. But in the ancient world, they understood things in terms of qualities of energy. So there's an energetic aspect that comes from higher spiritual realms, higher spiritual planes to create this world that gets expressed in the powers of color and shape and angle and proportion and number sequences. All these things are a kind of divine code or divine language of this world. In the ancient world, in every ancient tradition, including ancient Egypt, they had systems of initiation where people went through certain step-by-step processes that would expand their consciousness to higher levels. So they would begin to perceive themselves as a multi-dimensional being, operating on multiple planes at the same time. They would begin to understand the way that human consciousness can be developed much, much further than it is currently, to develop abilities that we tend to think of today as magical. And these other ancient cultures, they thought about things in a completely different way than we do. And that makes, if you see things from a different perspective, it makes things that seem to be impossible possible. We need to understand some of the fundamentals of what spiritual initiation really is. So when we do anything with our consciousness or our energy, it starts to create an energy pattern in our physical body and our energy field. Whatever thoughts we keep generating, whatever their quality is, whatever energies we're generating with our heart or with our actions in the world, it's developing a pattern that then creates a type of secret geometric structure in our energy field. And so this development of the consciousness and energy gets reflected in energy patterns in a person's field. And that's the pearl of great price that we can take through the gate of death and then into a new rebirth. If you do not use this lifetime for advancing your state, and you don't understand the patterns of life, then basically you're just going to be condemned to keep repeating the same mistakes, and you're going to repeat yourself to an endless cycle of suffering. So that's one of the main concepts in Buddhism, is how much unnecessary suffering are we exposing ourselves to by not striving for enlightenment, or not doing the basic work to be able to observe and control our mind, to observe and control and direct our feeling life, to observe and control our energy and our actions in the world. This is really a universal concept, but for the Buddhists, they talk about skillful action. Take skillful action, you'll develop yourself to a place where you have more freedom, you understand how things work, and you can make an educated decision. Or you can take unskillful action, just be in the reactive mind and react emotionally to everything around you in a way that's destructive and destroys relationships, destroys possibilities, and then you'll just stay on that cycle of suffering. So that's really the most fundamental part of it. But the other part of it is there's a deeper aspect of suffering beyond our usual day-to-day experience, and that is there's a type of subtle suffering that comes by not knowing who we are, by not remembering who we are, why we're here, what we chose to do in this incarnation, this larger spiritual context. It's often very subconscious in people, but it drives them to try to fill their lives with other things that just become destructive in the end. So this is really part of the classical knowledge about multiple planes of creation. At the highest level, what in the West we might call the divine plane, everything is one. There is no polarity, there is no duality, there's no yin-yang, there's no masculine-feminine, there's no separation of any kind. Everything is one. That's like the highest state that people attain in psychotropic experience. That you feel like you became one again in like the cosmic ocean and the cosmic being. And it's a very real state, and it's something that we yearn for, that we have embedded in us. It's something that we yearn for to experience with another person or to experience in high spiritual states. to get back to that state of oneness. But the level beneath the divine plane, what we might call the spiritual plane, is where that oneness divides into multiplicity, all the different powers of the divine. At that level, these are great beings, beings of a tremendously high stature. We think of them today as mythological. They're the one, divided into all of its separate powers, functions, qualities, as conscious beings on a very high spiritual level. So if you're in India, you might talk about the Shiva and Shakti. If you were in ancient Egypt, you would talk about the Netters, the conscious powers of nature. These are all aspects of these higher spiritual forces that then move down through the planes until we get to more microcosmic beings like ourselves. And so one of the mysteries in the ancient world is what they called the mystery of the black cube. How is it that we're amnesiacs in this physical world, and we begin to realize that we're a spiritual being, having a spiritual experience in a physical body in a physical world, and how did I get here? And so this mystery of the black cube is on how higher beings create a space-time enclosure for us to move into as young spiritual beings going through an educational process like going to kindergarten. So everything's brightly colored and solid, and so we become very self-aware in this process. But it's really the whole question of how we are able to attain self-awareness and then attain the higher goals of developing both love and freedom. And that becomes part of what, well, in the Chinese tradition, they call the 9 heart pains, the things that become the most challenging for us in life. We're all going to seek that partner that we can become one with again and unify with and have that love with, because love is all about unification into the one, no separation. But then you have to have the freedom, and you've got to be able to have your own time and your own space and make your own decisions and not just give yourself over to another person. That rhythm of love and freedom, particularly in intimate relationships, is one of the greatest challenges in life. It can have the greatest pleasures in life, but it can also have the greatest pain. But the whole of human life is really about how do we balance love and freedom, service to others and self-development, without flying off into mass narcissism in one sense, or losing our freedom and independence in the other polarity. So every human being is based on the same sacred geometry pattern, which, as I described, is a thought form in the mind of God from the high divine plane level that then manifests down through the planes as a particular pattern of energy and consciousness. We all have that exact same blueprint. That's why we all have the same chakras, the same energy meridians, exact same blueprint for all of us. Because originally we were all one. We were all one in the divine plane with the Godhead and the unified field. We were all one there. But for what's sometimes described as the pleasure of the Godhead, the pleasure of the one, we separated out into separate beings so that we could magnify our experience as separate beings, and we think we're completely individual and separate from everything else for a period of time, so that we can now develop in a fractal way as separate beings and magnify the whole experience set of everyone and everything. So we all have the exact same blueprint that gives us the capacity for consciousness, energy, making free will choices, but also unifying back to the one if we choose to or learn how to. And so that universal pattern of energy can then be individualized. Every act that we take, every thought that we generate, every emotion we generate, every action we take actually creates an emanation of a particular quality of energy out of our energy field. That's why some people are very pleasurable to be around, because what they're emanating out from the quality of their thoughts, their feelings, their actions is something that feels good to be around. For other people, it may not feel so good, because you can get caught in the reactive mind, a lot of detrimental, trauma-based, aggressive, fearful, whatever states. But it's always being projected out of the field. So whatever we do on a regular basis begins to etch these patterns into our energy field.